artificial intelligence from Stanford and received a job offer from Tesla, the kind of offer anyone in this field would consider a dream. And I reached that dream entirely on my own. No family connections, no red carpet. I survived on cheap coffee, late-night TA shifts, and weekend tutoring just to stay afloat. When I received the official offer, I cried. Not from happiness, but from relief. Finally, I could breathe. 1 week into my new job, while having lunch on the Fremont campus, I received an email with a subject line that simply read, "Overdue payment reminder, balance. $179, 436.23. I nearly dropped my drink. I had never taken out any loan except for a credit card with a limit under $2,000. Most of my tuition had been covered by scholarships. The rest I had worked hard to pay off. I never spent lavishly. I never got into debt. And now, an email from a bank, more specifically, a student loan agency, was telling me I owed nearly $180,000? Under my name? I thought it was a scam. Some kind of phishing attempt. But when I logged into their system through the official link, my account, profile, address, social security number, everything was correct. Not a single detail was wrong. The loan had been opened under my name 3 years ago, withdrawn in installments, quarterly, each time over $10,000. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the mouse. At that moment, all I could think was, this must be a mistake. Or someone has stolen my identity. I called the bank. They were polite, but cold. They confirmed the loan was made using verified information. Full name, date of birth, social security number. My old address in San Jose, my parents' house. When I asked about their verification process, they said, "We confirmed everything through the government's database. All the information matches. If you believe this is fraud, you'll need to file a formal dispute with documentation, which may take several months to resolve." I hung up, my palms soaked with sweat. Only one question echoed in my mind. Who could have done this? The answer came almost immediately. Who had access to all my personal information? Who knew every detail of my records from birth through college applications? Who used to handle my mail, accounts, and documents when I still lived at home? My parents. No one else. I didn't want to believe it. I had trusted them, even though we were always different. Me, the one who could manage on her own, and my younger sister Isabel, the one who needed to be taken care of. But to steal my identity and take out nearly $180,000 in loans? How could they? They wouldn't. They couldn't. I hit call on my mother's number. 3 rings. She picked up. As if nothing had happened, she greeted me softly. "Juliet, how's the new job going, honey?" I froze for a few seconds. Then I asked directly, without sugarcoating it, "Did you take out a loan under my name?" Silence. Just a few seconds, but it felt like a century. Then she replied, her breath quickening, her voice a confused mix of guilt and defense. Your dad and I only borrowed it temporarily. In case Isabel needed some startup capital. You weren't using it anyway, so." I didn't hear the rest. Everything inside me collapsed. I went quiet. My heart didn't ache anymore, it turned solid, like stone. I ended the call with just one sentence. "I'll call you back later." At that moment, I was no longer a daughter. I was an adult betrayed in a calculated way. They didn't just borrow my name, they violated my trust. They used my identity to fund my sister, someone who never went to college, never held a job, spent her days dreaming of being a model, and burned through money like air. It all started connecting. The calls from my mom asking, "You still use the old bank account, right?" The random questions about my zip code even after I moved out. It had all been preparation. I didn't call back right after hanging up. I needed to breathe. I needed to pick up the shattered pieces of my emotions just enough to be clear-headed for the next confrontation. But then, as if something inside me was stirred by an unnamed rage, I dialed my father. He answered after a few seconds, his voice calm, as if I'd just asked about his health, not about a debt large enough to bankrupt me at 23. I asked directly, "Did you take out a loan under my name?" There was no denial. No attempt to lie. He answered with a voice both soothing and tired. "We just borrowed it temporarily. Now that you have a good job, it doesn't really affect you. We're a family, aren't we?" I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. A family? How could a family secretly take their child's personal information, social security number, birth date, address, every legal detail, and sign off on a $180,000 loan without ever asking? How could a family consider throwing their child into debt a small thing? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just asked one thing. "What did you use the money for?" Silence again. A silence heavier than any shouting. Then my mother, who had now taken the phone side, as if preparing to admit something she knew was wrong but still hoped I would understand. Part of it was to give Isabel a chance to follow her dream. She wanted to go to a modeling program in LA, and she needed portfolio shoots, equipment, travel. I didn't let her finish. "How much?" I asked. "Around 70,000, her voice trailed off. My throat felt like it had been stripped of all air. Isabel, the sister who never scored an A in any class, who never completed a single college semester, who once told me at dinner, "School is useless. All you need is fame to live," had received a $70,000 investment from my parents for her dream of becoming a model. And me, the one who scraped together every penny for school, who never asked them for a dime until graduation, who sold blood during sophomore year just to afford rent at an off-campus dorm, became the name they used on a debt contract. Not because I needed it, but because they needed me as a springboard for my sister. I asked, "Why me? Why not under your own names? Why not tell me? Why did you think this was acceptable?" My father started to lose patience. "Juliet, you're overreacting. We did this for the family, for the future. You've got a good job now, paying this off won't be a big deal. Isabel needs help right now." My mother cut in, trying to soften things. "At the time, everything happened so fast. I just thought if we told you, you'd get angry right away. I figured we'd tell you once things were settled, but then you got busy and I felt awkward." I laughed. A cold laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because there was nothing left to feel. "Awkward?" I repeated the word, as if testing whether it even made sense in this context. "You were too awkward to tell me, but not too awkward to steal my identity and borrow money in my name?" I wanted to scream, to break something. But all I did was bury my head into my desk in my rented Palo Alto apartment, shut my eyes tight, and let the pain spiral inward. Isabel called me that evening. I hadn't planned to answer, but I picked up. Part of me wanted to hear what she would say. Part of me needed to confirm this wasn't a nightmare. Her voice rang out, shrill as always. "Oh my God, you're being so dramatic. Please don't turn this into a whole thing. I'm not asking you to pay it, okay? You're the successful one, you'll get through this. I just need a chance. It's not even that big of a deal." Not a big deal. A debt of $180,000 under my name. A criminal act. A betrayal. And to her it was just an opportunity. I don't even remember what I said after that. Probably not much. All I know is that when I hung up, I felt like someone had slapped me across the face. Not a painful slap, but the kind that wakes you up from the dream I used to call family. I began gathering documents. I consulted a lawyer about identity theft. I pulled full banking statements. I wrote down every conversation. I archived emails, backed up texts, printed every file from the loan company's system. Every sheet of paper felt like a cut, but I knew I had to face it head on. I used to think I could handle this quietly. That if they just paid the money back, I wouldn't take things further. But after last night, after that call, I understood. They didn't feel guilty. They didn't think it was wrong. They were only afraid of getting caught, and I no longer wanted to forgive. I had no obligation to protect anyone anymore. I drove to my parents' house the very next morning. No warning. I didn't call. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need them rehearsing their excuses or practicing regretful glances. I just needed to look them in the eyes and hear it face to face. Not over the phone, not through a screen. The wooden gate creaked open, still the same as it was back in high school, but that pale blue house no longer felt like home. I stepped into the living room, where my mother was folding laundry and Isabel was lounging on the sofa, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone, her new acrylic nails so long she could barely tap a button. My mother looked up first, startled. "Juliet, why didn't you say you were coming?" I didn't respond. I looked at Isabel. "We need to talk." She rolled her eyes. "Then talk. No need for drama." Her tone was flat, dismissive, like I was interrupting an idle afternoon in the life of someone whose only concern was maintaining her figure. I pulled a chair, sat down across from her. "You know exactly what's going on, don't you?" I asked, straight to the point. Isabel didn't even look at me. "You're making such a fuss. It's just money. You've got a Tesla, a Stanford degree, your own place. This few $100,000 isn't going to kill you. And me, I need a chance." Then she glanced at Mom, smirking. "She's always been the good one, the smart one. What's the big deal if she sacrifices a little for once?" I felt something inside me turn cold. Not anger, but a kind of disappointment so deep it felt hollow. I asked one last time, my voice steady and low. "You don't think it's wrong that our parents used my identity to take out a loan for you?" Isabel scoffed. "You think everyone makes it on their own? I never had the chances you did. I'm not good at school. But people need a push. And you had more than enough. Why not help your own sister, just this once?" She stood up, brushed off her dress, and walked upstairs like that whole conversation had been nothing more than boring small talk over tea. I don't know what to call the feeling I had in that moment. My rage was no longer fire. It was ice. The kind that freezes every last bit of hope, of emotion I once held for Isabel. I stood up, walked toward the kitchen where my father was sipping coffee, pretending not to have heard a thing. I stopped right in front of him. "I came here to make it clear, once and for all. Either you start repaying every dollar taken out under my name, or I'll file charges for identity theft, financial fraud, and the damage done to my personal credit record." My father put down his coffee cup, his expression suddenly darkening. "Are you threatening us?" he said, voice low. "No," I replied. "I'm stating a fact, and everything I just said is fully aligned with California state law." My mother walked in at that moment, clearly panicked. "Juliet, you can't do this to family. We're blood. Are you really going to let money tear us apart?" I turned to her. My eyes, by then, held no sadness, only exhaustion. "I'm not tearing us apart. This family did that a long time ago. I'm just the only one willing to admit it." My mother started crying. Like always. Those tears used to soften me. But now, they held no weight. They were a worn-out weapon I'd become immune to. My father stood, voice tightening. "You're too logical. You never think about others. Family is about sacrifice, understand?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I sacrificed my whole childhood trying to be the perfect daughter you wanted. I gave up weekends, student parties, even sleep just to earn scholarships so I wouldn't have to ask for money. And what did I get in return? A nearly $200,000 debt in my name because someone in this family needed a handout." I took a deep breath. "No, I'm done sacrificing. All I have left is myself." I left that house an hour later. No one saw me to the door. No one asked me to stay. No one apologized. Just sighs, crying, and a silence so heavy it hung over the room like a verdict no one dared to read aloud. I got back to my apartment that night, streetlights casting long beams across the wooden floor. I turned on the lights, sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started typing, "Dear Attorney." I wrote each line to the lawyer I had just found. I attached every piece of evidence: bank emails, credit reports, messages from my parents, recordings of our calls. Each file, each chat thread, felt like a piece of my own blood, but I needed them. Not for revenge, but to protect myself. I knew this wouldn't be easy. A part of me still clung to the question, am I going too far? Could I forgive this? But then I remembered Isabel's laugh. I remembered the cold look in my father's eyes. I remembered my mother's words. You're letting money break this family. Number. This family broke itself the moment they chose to sacrifice me for the child they always favored. I don't remember exactly when I realized I wasn't the chosen child in the family. Maybe it wasn't a single moment. Maybe it was a slow, quiet accumulation so steady it became normal. I grew up in a typical two-story American house in San Jose, neatly trimmed lawn, white-painted garage door, a beige couch, and thin rug in the living room. From the outside, my family looked ordinary. But inside, there was an unspoken rule that only we understood. Isabel was always the priority. And I was the one who never caused trouble. How? I was the child who woke herself up in the morning, who made her own lunch from the age of 10. Who sat for hours in the school library doing homework instead of asking Mom to explain anything I didn't understand. I didn't dare to be a bother. Every time I asked a question, Mom would sigh and say, "You're so smart, and you still need help." Eventually, I stopped asking. I taught myself. I became fluent in Google and textbooks. I grew used to living with silent expectations. Expectations no one said aloud, but always hung over me like a rope tightening around my neck. Isabel was different. She was pampered like a fragile jewel. Skipped school? Mom would say, "She's just stressed, it's fine to take a day off." Broke a vase worth several $100s? Dad would shrug, "It's just an object, as long as she's not hurt." Missed assignments, low grades, bad conduct? They'd laugh and shake their heads, "She just hasn't found the right path yet." But me? One small mistake coming home late, miscalculating a math problem, spilling a glass of water at the dinner table was enough to become proof that I wasn't mature enough, responsible enough, or good enough to meet their expectations. I got punished, scolded, reprimanded. Not because of serious wrongdoing, but because I was supposed to set the example. There's one moment I remember vividly. 7th grade, I got 3 questions wrong on a math worksheet, not even a graded test, just homework. But I had promised I'd get perfect marks all semester, so Mom saw it as a lack of seriousness. I was banned from attending my best friend's birthday, made to write a 2-page apology letter, and told to relearn the entire chapter that night. That same evening, Isabel, then in 3rd grade, skipped the entire afternoon of school to hang out with friends. When Dad found out, he simply said, "Next time, ask for permission." Then, he took her out for ice cream. I sat in my study room, watching them through the window, laughing as they got into the car. I didn't cry, I just sat there, silent. And in that moment, I understood justice didn't exist in this family. I was just a tool to uphold the image of the perfect child. Isabel, no matter what she did, would always be forgiven. I don't remember how many times I was praised, but I remember clearly the sting of being used as a comparison to shame Isabel. "Why can't you be more like your sister Juliet?" Mom would say. And I would sit there in silence, feeling no pride. I didn't want to be a benchmark. I wanted to be seen, to be understood, to be loved, not for my achievements, but simply for being me. Isabel grew up believing that every door would open if she was cute enough, cried enough, or stubborn enough. I, on the other hand, learned something else. No one is coming to save you. If you don't carry yourself, push through, rescue yourself, no one will stop to ask if you're okay. I started working at 16 waiting tables, tutoring, cleaning the library, babysitting, not because we were broke, but because I never wanted to ask anyone for anything. I didn't want to owe anyone pity. The day I received the full-ride scholarship to Stanford, Mom said just one thing. "You've taken a weight off my shoulders." No hug, no congratulations. Just a sigh, like I had completed a task. But when Isabel announced she wanted to drop out of school to pursue modeling, my parents threw a small party at home. There was cake, there were balloons, there was a toast. Follow your passion. I saw it all through my phone screen from my Stanford dorm room, after a long, exhausting day at my internship. I turned off the phone and said nothing. Now, looking back, I don't feel angry anymore. I just see a little girl, the girl I used to be, sitting in the corner of a room, clutching a book, trying to learn how to live quietly. Not to bother. Not to be loud. Not to ask to be loved. And then I see something else. That little girl grew up. She made it. She stood up on her own. Without anyone's help. Without needing to be saved. I was never the chosen child. But now, I choose myself. I sent an official letter to my parents. Typed. Printed on the letterhead of my attorney's firm. The content was clear, brief, and firm. They had 14 days to repay the amount taken out in my name at minimum, the portion spent on Isabel, or I would proceed with a lawsuit. No more soft words. No more gentle tones from a daughter trying to keep the peace. I was no longer a daughter in this negotiation. I was a potential plaintiff. And they, the ones who once called me their child, were defendants who could be held accountable. My lawyer, a woman of Iranian-American descent named Masa, understood my case better than anyone. She used to work for the Office of Consumer Protection and had handled hundreds of identity theft cases committed by family members. "This is more common than you think," she said during our first meeting. "But you're one of the few who actually take action." She looked at me not with pity but with respect. And I knew, for the first time, I had an ally. The letter was sent on a Monday. Silence for 3 days. On the 4th, my mother called not to apologize, but to ask if there's a way we can compromise. I said, the only compromise is to start paying the money back. The next day, I received the first transfer, $8,000. A week later, another $12,000. Then $5,000. Small numbers compared to the total debt, but at least they were signs of concession. Still, what chilled me wasn't the money, it was how they reacted. Not a single apology. No message saying, we were wrong. Just dry, robotic banking notes, payment from bank transfer. I had hoped they would at least understand. That if a daughter they once believed to be obedient, polite, and enduring was now cutting ties, now dragging everything into the light, then surely something must be very wrong. But, no. They still saw themselves as victims. In a conversation with my aunt, who had quietly messaged me to ask what was going on, I learned that my mother had told the extended family I was rebelling, that I was being manipulated by a greedy lawyer, that Juliet doesn't know how to think for her family. The story had been twisted into a soap opera where the ones at fault became the ones who were hurt. And me? I was just the successful but cold-hearted daughter. Oliver Vox. Meanwhile, Isabel continued living as if nothing had happened. Her Instagram was still full of updates, new outfits, parties, friends, photo studios in LA. Once, she posted a story bragging about her first performance outfit bought with her own money, and I almost laughed. Her own money? Whose pocket, mine, or the identity she hijacked to live a carefree life? I didn't comment. Didn't message, I didn't want a conversation, but inside me, a new layer of ice formed. Not from jealousy, but from the clarity that she had never felt an ounce of guilt. I began pulling away completely. No phone calls, no texts. I moved all case files into a separate folder and drafted a detailed schedule to track every payment. Masa helped me prepare a temporary civil contract. If they failed to follow the repayment plan, the lawsuit would proceed immediately. My parents signed, not willingly, but they signed. A way to buy my silence. They still thought I would soften. That with time, everything would return to normal. But what they didn't know was that the old normal was already dead. I was no longer that 17-year-old girl crying quietly in her room because they forgot her birthday. I wasn't the sophomore who texted her mom while sick and never got a reply. I was Juliet, a grown woman, independent, and for the first time in her life, choosing herself instead of preserving a family that had rotted from the inside long ago. After 2 months, they had repaid nearly $45,000. There was still a long way to go, but I no longer cared about the number. The only thing that mattered was, I hadn't stayed silent. I had stood up. And even if it cost me the last bit of warmth I had left, I had chosen what was right. I started sleeping again. No more nightmares about debt, about betrayal. I woke up early, drank my coffee, drove to the office, and did the work I loved. No one owned me anymore. No one could assign me any duty I hadn't agreed to. My family now a real memory, but no longer a power over me. I never expected a beautiful ending. But at the very least, I had hoped that silence might keep things stable. The payments from my parents had been regular small, but punctual just enough to make me believe they were trying to make things right. I had even formed the habit of opening my bank emails every Monday, checking the transaction notifications, and closing them like a routine admin task. But in the 3rd month, nothing came. No alerts. No messages. No explanation. I thought maybe they forgot. I gave it 3 more days. Still nothing. I sent a reminder via email, not in anger, just a polite notification like any contractual agreement would require. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voice was rushed, almost trembling. "Juliet, I'm so sorry, this time we need to delay a bit. Things with Isabel are a mess, she's in trouble." I said nothing. She continued, "She's being sued. During a photo shoot at a pool, she dropped a filming device into the water worth over $40,000. The company is demanding compensation, or they'll file a civil lawsuit for damages to specialized equipment." I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even sympathetic. I asked, calmly, "And you used the remaining money instead of paying me back to save Isabel?" Silence. Then a sigh. She panicked. She didn't know what to do. "I couldn't let her get sued, and your situation, maybe it can wait a little longer?" I gave a faint laugh. "Wait? Like how you temporarily used my identity to take out loans? Like how you briefly forgot I'm not this family's personal bank?" I didn't wait for an answer. I hung up and began writing the final warning letter. Masa, my lawyer, helped me draft a clear notice. If payments were not resumed within 24 hours, we would file an identity theft lawsuit with the Santa Clara County Court, including full documentation and a claim for the principal amount, interest, and emotional damages. I sent the letter at 10:47 a.m. with a countdown clock embedded in the PDF, exactly 24 hours. Not a minute longer. That afternoon, my father called. He hadn't reached out since signing the repayment agreement. His voice was hoarse, angry. "You're really going to drag your own parents into court? Humiliate your family over a few dozen grand?" I answered plainly. "You're wrong. It's not a few dozen. It's nearly 200. And it's my dignity, not your reputation, that's on the line." He snapped. "Isabel's in crisis. She could go bankrupt at 22. How can you be so heartless?" I took a deep breath. Each word cut like glass. "I'm not heartless. I just stopped being the sacrificial one." I hung up. At exactly 10:49 the next morning, no payment arrived. I walked into Masa's office and signed the lawsuit paperwork, 32 pages, with every piece of evidence attached. Bank records, emails, messages, credit reports. As I signed, I didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. I just felt light, as if I'd been carrying a boulder for 3 months and had finally put it down. The lawsuit was filed through the Santa Clara County Court's e-system that same day. Masa confirmed that within 72 hours, a summons would be delivered to my parents' address. They would need legal counsel. There was no turning back. No more begging. No more delaying with tears or pleas. That night, I sat in my apartment, looking out at the glowing yellow lights of Fremont streets. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. The only thing I felt was quiet. A strange, unfamiliar kind of quiet. I'd grown used to the noise of pain, so its absence left me slightly disoriented. But then I realized this is what it feels like to rise. To say no. To choose justice over comfort. 2 days later, I received an email from the bank confirming that the loan dispute had been officially recorded and would be moved into internal investigation once the court's decision was made. I smiled softly. A smile that didn't need an audience. That afternoon, my aunt, my mother's older sister, called me. She was one of the few in the family who understood and had once texted me, saying, "Protect yourself." Her voice was low and somber. "Your parents are a mess right now. Your mom can't sleep, and your dad is angry all the time. Isabel is the same as always." I didn't say anything. She went on, I'm not here to interfere. I just want you to know you're not wrong. You're doing what your parents should have taught Isabel a long time ago. My throat tightened, but this time, it was from gratitude. At least someone understood. The final letter had been sent. And this time, I wasn't looking back. My family was no longer a sacred concept, it was simply a group of adults who had chosen self-interest over decency. I couldn't fix them. I couldn't save Isabel from her consequences. But I could save myself. And that's exactly what I was doing, step by step, decision by decision, not out of revenge, but for survival. The appointment at the law office was set for a Thursday morning. Not for reconciliation. Not to find common ground, just to formally confirm the legally required settlement terms. Masa told me I wasn't obligated to attend, she could handle it all on my behalf. But I said, I need to finish this face to face. Not because I wanted confrontation, but because I needed to look at them one last time to know that I owed no one anything in my heart anymore. The office was on the 8th floor of a glass building in downtown San Jose. Quiet space, a long walnut table, cold white lighting casting sharp reflections on gray-white walls. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat across from Masa. She handed me a printed copy of the agreement and gently reminded me. They might ask for more time. But you don't have to say yes. They might say hurtful things. Just remember, you don't owe them an explanation anymore. I nodded. I didn't say anything. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. The rage that had torn through me in those first weeks was gone, leaving only a quiet hollowness, not hatred, not hope, just a deep exhaustion. Exhaustion from carrying too much for too long. Exhaustion from having to do what the adults in the house should have done long ago. The door opened. My father walked in first, his face gaunt, eyes shadowed. My mother followed, her hair slightly disheveled, like she'd spent a sleepless night. And finally, Isabel with a designer handbag slung over her shoulder, leggings tight on her frame, phone in hand, eyes not even bothering to look up. They sat down on the other side of the table. No one spoke for the first few minutes, just the sound of pages turning and pens clicking. Masa began, calmly explaining the procedure. My father listened but never once looked at me. My mother nodded mechanically, as if praying for it to be over quickly. Isabel leaned back in her chair, sighed, exasperated. Then suddenly, she spoke. I don't understand how it got to this point. I never meant for this to happen. I never asked anyone to do anything for me. I was just living up to what everyone expected. If someone is to blame, it's mom and dad for not controlling what they did. I turned to look at her. For the first time that morning, my gaze lingered on her for more than a few seconds. I saw an adult wearing the clothes of a teenager, still living in a blind spot where responsibility didn't exist. Still thinking of herself as a victim of a system she had passively been swept into. Still unable to offer a simple, sincere apology. I said nothing. She wasn't worth my anger anymore. I looked straight at my parents. I used to want to forgive, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. I used to believe that if you just paid the money back, everything would be okay, but it won't. What you did and how you reacted afterward went beyond what I could accept. Not because of the money, but because of the silence. Because not once did you admit wrongdoing, not one apology, not one moment of remorse. I paused not because I was choking up, but because I wanted them to hear every word in full. My mother lowered her head, saying nothing. My father folded his arms, eyes like ice. Isabel gave a faint scoff and looked away. I knew they didn't understand. Maybe they never would. And that, right there, was why I had to end it. From today, I continued, we will no longer have any ties beyond what the law requires. I won't attend Thanksgiving. I won't call it Christmas. I won't check in when someone's sick. I won't appear in any more family photos. I'm walking away, not in anger, but in finality. I stood up and folded the documents. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't need you to understand me. I only need you to remember this. I fulfilled my part of the responsibility right up to the very last moment. Masa nodded quietly, then rose with me. The meeting was over. There were no handshakes, no goodbyes. We stepped into the hallway. I turned back one final time. My father was staring out the window. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. And Isabel was bent over her phone, as if she had just received a message more interesting than anything that had just happened. I knew that was the last time. The last time I would see them not through a screen or memory. The last time I would call them family. The elevator stopped on the ground floor. As the doors opened, a strange feeling washed over me, light, like a breath released after days of rain. I stepped onto the street. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had done everything I needed to do. A year later, I live in Austin, Texas, in a small apartment at the end of a street shaded by oak trees. Every morning, I make coffee, put on soft jazz, and open my laptop to begin work on the project I've poured my heart into. An AI system that supports elderly people living alone, those often forgotten by the very families they raised. The work is slow, full of challenges. It's not the kind of thing that lands you on the front page. But I feel alive, truly alive, with a clear purpose, no interference, no one calling me too sensitive. One autumn afternoon, I unexpectedly received a dinner invitation from Aunt Evelyn, my mother's older sister. She's one of the few relatives who stayed in touch after everything. I accepted without hesitation. We sat in a small diner on the corner, where the waiter knew everyone's name and didn't need to see a menu to know their order. She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled gently. "You look much more at peace," she said. I nodded, set down my tea, and replied, "Maybe because I no longer have to make anyone proud." She didn't ask about the lawsuit. But I knew she knew everything. After a while, she said slowly, "Your parents live very quietly now. They're no longer invited to family gatherings. The neighbors have turned cold, they avoid going out. And the finances? Well, I suppose you can imagine." I didn't respond right away. I just looked out the window. The sky was low that day, the light a soft gray that fell across the sidewalk like sheer velvet. I took a deep breath, then answered, "Everything is where it should be now, Aunt." No anger, no bitterness. Not even regret. I was simply telling the truth as a way of acknowledging that life, though slow, eventually rearranges itself into the order it was meant to be. Aunt Evelyn gently touched my hand. "You did nothing wrong, Juliet, and I'm proud of you." I smiled. That was the sentence I had dreamed of hearing from my mother for over 20 years, but I realized the most meaningful validation often comes not from those who are supposed to love us, but from those who choose to. Anyway, as for Isabel, after the court's final ruling, she sent me a long string of messages. At first, anger, then complaints, then sobbing, then blame. I'm just a product of family pressure. I read every word. Didn't skip a single one. Then I blocked her number, blocked her email, blocked her social media. Not out of hatred, but because I had forgiven her in the quietest way possible. By not carrying her into my future. Now, every morning, I walk into my little office where a whiteboard hangs right above my desk. On it, written in black ink, is a sentence I wrote my first night in Austin. "You don't need to be chosen to succeed." I wrote it as a reminder that I no longer live to prove anything to anyone. I live only to honor what I believe in. Sometimes I think of it all like a movie. Each person playing their role. My parents, the ones who believed love could coexist with control. Isabel, the girl raised under the shadow of indulgence, never taught to be accountable. And me, the quiet side character who ended up rewriting the script. I didn't win through revenge. I won because I stopped hoping they would change. And from that moment on, I was free. Someone once asked me, "Don't you feel lonely, walking away from your family?" I don't deny it. There are moments of loneliness. There are moments of emptiness. But being alone in the right place feels far lighter than staying in a family where every step requires permission, every success comes with strings, and every mistake becomes a reason to sacrifice. I chose solitude in exchange for peace. And I've never once regretted it. To anyone who's ever been betrayed by their own family, I just want to say this. You have the right to draw boundaries. You have the right to love yourself more than you love a blood tie. And you are not selfish for saying, enough. We grow up in a culture that teaches us family is sacred, but kindness doesn't come from a title. It comes from actions. And if those actions keep hurting you again and again, you have the right to leave, not with rage, not for revenge, just to live. I look back on the road I've taken not to relive the pain, but to remind myself I'm no longer there. I stepped out. I stood up. I moved far away from the loop of warped expectations. Now, I spend my days helping the elderly feel accompanied, feel remembered. Maybe, somewhere along the way, I'm healing myself by offering others what I once lacked. If you've ever been used, dismissed, or betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you, I want you to know. It's okay to hurt. And it's not selfish to walk away. Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear what you've been through, and I'll see you in the next story. My name is Isabel Monroe, 30 years old. And right now, I'm sitting backstage at the International Women's Leadership Conference where, in just a few minutes, I'll walk onto the main stage, hold the microphone, and say something I once believed I would never get the chance to say out loud. The right wing of the stage is slightly open, and through the slit in the curtain, I can see a small corner of the main hall. And in that moment, I see her, Lily, my younger sister. The one who, 2 years ago, stood in the middle of our mother's birthday party, raised her wine glass,